Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar about how to use design thinking in the context of business analysis. This webinar is being done in collaboration with one of the IIB chapters here in the United States. It's the Bluegrass chapter, and it's going to be about basically what's design thinking and how that applies to business analysis and overall how that applies to software projects, right? So just a quick reminder, you are all in listen only mode, and that means that even if you speak, nobody will hear you. But there is a section in the GoToWebinar panel that you can use that is called questions, where you can ask anything there. And we'll leave some time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you may have, either about design thinking or just in mind or the IIBA, or I don't know, any kind of question that you may have. Even don't worry, just feel free to ask anything that you want there, because even if we don't have enough time to answer all the questions, we'll make sure to answer all of them via email. Okay, and first of all, let me introduce you to Terry. Sandy is the president of the IIB chapter in the Bluegrass, and he wants to have some words for you guys.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar hosted by the Bluegrass chapter of the IIBA and presented by one of our premier sponsors, Justin Mine and Victor Canessa. My name is Terry Sunday, and I'm the president of the Bluegrass chapter of the IIBA, and we're glad to have you here with us today. The International Institute of Business Analysis is the nonprofit professional association dedicated to the field of business analysis. The IIBA has over 29,000 plus members and more than 300 corporate members and 100 local chapters worldwide. The IIBA supports the recognition of the profession, and it works to maintain the global standard for the practices and certifications surrounding BAs. A few of the benefits of having an IIBA membership are: you have the opportunity to increase your knowledge of the BA profession. You can receive education and training support for your personal growth as a BA. You will be eligible to join a local IIBA chapter. You will have access to job search capabilities and career roadmap assistance provided by IIBA. And you have access to resource material for their 4 levels of certification. On this slide, under their logo, you will see their web address. Contact them if you like. Locally, we are the Bluegrass chapter of the IIBA, located in Lexington, Kentucky. This nonprofit chapter was started in the fall of 2013. We currently have 45 active members, with 7 of these members on our board of directors, and approximately 20 to 30 people who are regularly attending our monthly events. Our core purpose is to unite a community of professionals to create better business outcomes. Our vision is to be the thought leader on the business analysis topics in the Bluegrass region. Our mission is to bring together the Bluegrass community of professionals who deliver organizational change to promote the best practices in delivering these better business outcomes. As you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, we were voted the 2016 Innovation Award winner by the International IIBA out of its 120 local chapters worldwide. A few of the benefits of having a Bluegrass IIBA membership or joining any local chapter are: you will have a chance to face-to-face network with peers, recruiters, vendors, and professionals from other related fields at events that are sponsored by the chapter. You will have a chance to understand the concepts, tasks, and techniques as described in a book called A Guide to the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, or BABOK, which is solely used by the IIBA for their certifications and best practices. You'll have a chance to participate in study groups to explore how the BABOK is applied for self-improvement and for professional gain. And you'll have a chance to learn about certifications and links to additional resources and training opportunities in your area. On this slide, you will see our Bluegrass IIBA web address and our email address. Feel free to contact us at any time. Part of helping us win the 2016 Innovation Award were things such as hosting webinars to help educate the community on various topics like this. So with that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this webinar from Just in Mind, and I hope that you are able to be educated by what they have to present. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you to all of you that have confirmed that you guys could hear Terry. Sorry for the bad quality, but that's what it is. Just to give a brief overview of what we're going to talk today here, this is the agenda for this webinar. And again, we're going to leave some room at the very end of the webinar for just answer any kind of questions that you can leave in the panel on your right or on your left. I guess it's on your right. It's the Go to Webinar panel. There's a section there where you can leave any questions about design thinking, the IIBA, anything. So we're going to explain the challenge or the problem that we are going to tackle with design thinking. That is why many IT projects or software projects fail. Pretty sure you're not familiar with software projects failing at all, but in some companies you'll be surprised. Design thinking, what it is and how that's related to BAs, right? Or to business analysis. Prototyping, we're going to talk about prototyping and what it is and why is it valuable. And we're going to actually build a prototype in the context of a made up kind of design thinking case. So you will get actually to see some real practice on how design thinking can be applied in a practical way. That would be the how to apply design thinking using the Just in Mind. And we'll leave some time for Q&A. Well, what's the challenge? There are some institutions that have run studies on software projects in both big and small companies all around the world. The Standish Group, Forrester Research, the Meta Group, you name it. And they came up with these surprising numbers. I don't know if you relate with this. If you do, we're really sorry for you. If you don't, wow, yeah, you're in a really, really great organization and you guys are doing a great job there. But just to run some numbers, but you guys, 60% of the projects, we're talking about software projects here, fail, run late, or are over budget. That's a lot. 45% of the features are never used. 53% of the projects will have an increase of nearly 200% of the original budget. And 30% of the project costs are due to rework. 30% of those increases are because of rework. And that's the key word for this session. That's every project manager's nightmare. Rework. Rework means that you have done a ton of work, and when you launch or when you're about to launch the product or the project that you have created, well, there are things that need to be done again. And normally they're not like small things like, oh, this is not the right color. Normally it has to do with processes and so on. And it can be very costly and deeply annoying, of course. So what can we do against such reckless hate? Well, they also have run some studies about why projects succeed and why projects fail, and they have come up with a 10 kind of topics or points that makes projects successful. So it's very important to get the user involved in the projects. You need executive management support. You need a clear statement of requirements, a proper planning, realistic expectations, smaller project milestones, competent staff, ownership, clear vision, hard working, you name it. I mean, that's very obvious, right? And why then some projects fail? Well, lack of user input, incomplete requirements, changing requirements, and so on and so forth. Don't know if you are able to actually identify what I'm about to show you guys right now, but most of the things that make projects successful, and also the things that make a project fail, they all have to do, we highlight here, many of them have to do with communication. There is a huge issue here uh, that has to do with bad communication. Um, why? I mean, we do a ton of work to make it clear how the project is going to be, and we have these insanely long meetings with any stakeholder that is involved in the project, and we write these documents, these requirement documents that in some cases can be like, I don't know, 300 pages, 200 pages of super highly detailed description of what the application has to do with all the processes. If you are like in the sector of healthcare or government, then there you have all these legal requirements and regulations that are there. So it's like everything is under control. Is everything is in that document or those documents. So why the heck at the very end of the project we end having these kind of conversations like, no, 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 that's not what we needed or not what we meant. It's like, wow, why didn't you tell me at the very beginning of the project when I sent you or when we were revising those documents? Well, I'm going to explain two real cases here, and of course I'm not going to say names or company names at all. I was once talking to a CDO of a big healthcare company, a global international healthcare company, and we were talking about. I was just sitting next to his desk, and we were talking about methodologies and so on. So nothing related to this. But at some point, one guy just comes to the CTO, and he hands him over a specifications document. It was a very thick one, like 2 fingers thick. Um, and he goes away. So the CTO was talking to me still, and then he took a look at the document, and then he grabbed the document. He just, passed the pages just real quick, and without even reading any single line of that document, just went ahead and signed it. So that that document was about a project that cost millions of dollars. He didn't even read it, not even a single line of it. Why is that? Well, because he knows, first of all, that it's just humanly impossible to read that document without just falling asleep. It's just so technical, so long. I mean, to be honest, who's going to read 300 pages of technical stuff? That's just impossible. And the other reason is that he knows that no matter what the document says, at any point, especially at the end of the project, he will be able to force his team to do any type of change that he wants them to do. Another case was of, well, one friend of mine, and he's a consultant, and he used to place Easter eggs on the specification documents, like sentences that read something like, if you're reading this, come to me and I will give you $20. He said that in 15 years of experience, nobody ever has come to him asking for those $20. So what that means is that not that we are not doing the job properly. The thing is that we don't have the right way to communicate all that information to the right people just to verify if that's what has to be done. What is the consequence of that? That's the rework thing, right? And there are studies estimating the cost of rework of, well, is basically of making changes on the specifications depending on the phase. So it can be, after launch, changing something can be 100 times more costly than detecting that change at the very beginning of the project. Okay, so what's design thinking, right? Well, let's start by saying what design thinking is not. Design thinking is composed by two words that that might be scary for some of us. Design can relate to Photoshop and these sort of things, and it can be certainly scary. And of course, thinking sometimes is scary as well. But anyway, so design thinking, what is not art or graphics or logo design or nothing like in that direction. We're not talking about design in the terms of a graphical designer kind of thing. It's qualitative. It's not qualitative, right? And it's not done only by designers. So what is design thinking? Well, design thinking is a way to approach the definition of something, like in our case, a software, following different steps and doing those steps in an iterative way. So the whole thing here is an emphasize a lot on the collaboration thing, right? It's really important to find a way to have not just BAs, but also UX designers, developers, executives, business users, QA, everyone collaborating in the process of designing, or just designing in the terms of defining what that software should do. So there are several steps. One is to empathize. That means to understand exactly what the user needs are, where are the constraints. Then there is the phase of defining that. And instead of trying to define the whole thing at the same time, you can start defining things like in a bottom-up way, right? Then you start an ideation phase. You can where you need the collaboration of different profiles there. And then, and this is the key, you need to prototype. What we found in our experience and talking with many companies is that the only thing that everyone understands is either the final product or something that looks and feels like the final product. And that's the reason why most of the changes come at the very end of the project, because that's the first time the users are able to actually see the product in action. And that's the moment where they can actually give meaningful feedback, saying things like those devastating sentences like, oh no, you got it all wrong, right? I didn't mean that, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, testing. If you prototype, the whole goal of building prototypes is to test them out, to give them to the final users, to stakeholders, to developers, so they can have their say there, and to test if that idea actually matches the requirements and the business needs that you are trying to define in that moment. Of course, this being an iterative kind of process, you end having the same, you end in the same point, having some something that defines completely the whole software, but it has been done iteratively, and and you have been able to incorporate uh, the the feedback from all the different stakeholders there. Okay, so design thinking is bottom up. You start from specific features, and in an iterative way, you start building up. Again, it's iterative. It's all about collaboration, right? So it will need you to get out of your building. It would need you to get to talk to people. You know, people sometimes are really nice. So what can you use design thinking for? Well, one is to elicit requirements, right? To get requirements, to discover um, new requirements. And why? I mean, you already have all the requirements. I mean, you're a business analyst or you're a product manager or whatever. You know what all the requirements already. You don't need to ask anybody else, right? Well, what normally happens is that it's really hard for users to tell you what they need until they see something. So just for them trying to imagine what they need out of the air is far more hard to do than giving you feedback on something that already exists, right? That you created. It's also really important to match the business requirements with the user requirements. So I'm pretty sure that you all are experts in every project about what the business requirements are. But it's really hard to make them match with the user requirements, right? So visualizing things, visualizing requirements in a way that the users understand will allow you to have enough feedback to make that match. You can also use design thinking to validate some of the decisions that you have done in the project, and even gather some data to justify those changes in the specifications. And of course, to avoid scope creep, right? Mm, to make to arise those hidden requirements that normally they don't come to the very end of the project, but with this technique, and especially with the right tool, you will be able to do this. Okay, so that sounds really good, but how can you do that? I mean, what's the process in a practical way? So let's say, okay, today I want to start doing things with design thinking. What should I do? Okay, so one thing that you can do is to actually use just in mind. That is so flexible that you can even use it in the context of design thinking. Just in mind is a prototyping platform, um, and its goal is to provide a way to document, visualize, and communicate effectively uh, a software, right? A software definition. So let's say that I start a new project, right? And I already have a bunch of requirements. So, and I'm going to use Justify for that. Okay, so in this case, it's a web kind of application that applies also to desktop applications or anything like that. And we're going to start from scratch. So as we were saying, normally projects start with a bunch of business requirements or just a bunch of notes in a notepad that you have taken in some kind of meetings, right? Okay, so one thing that we can do is to start putting all that initial information that we have inside this project that we have just created in Just in Mind. We'll see that that is going to be really important because we will be able to actually define traceability to all the visuals that we're going to define later to these textual descriptions of the requirements. And also, at the very end, you will be able to actually generate a specifications document. So if you actually need that document, which is sometimes just something that you need to do, well, having all that information here will allow you to just in a click, just generate that document. Okay, so one thing that you can do here is if you don't already have some kind of requirements management tool, you can use this as your requirements management tool and just create your own business requirements here. You can customize these fields so to make them your own, or if you're already using another requirements management tool like Jira, Team Foundation, IBM Doors, you can actually integrate your requirements management tool with Just in Mind. And instead of writing the different requirements, you can just configure your connection and then just import and grab all those requirements from that platform into your Just in Mind. If you use the most common requirements management tool in the world, Excel, well, you can export and import from Excel as well. So what we have here is, well, different, I mean, if you are into Agile, that would be user stories. Okay, we can start with just a bunch of user stories. You can always go and click into one of those user stories that you have imported and just open it in the requirements tool. And so the process that we're going to do here is we're going to turn those textual descriptions into visuals, those visuals into interactive prototypes. Then we're going to share those prototypes to get some feedback. And then from that feedback, we can just keep iterating or even discover new requirements in that process. Okay, that's what we are going to do. Okay, so we have these guys, and let's start visualizing. Before getting into a prototype, it's normally a very good idea to start defining things as diagrams. We'll get into the prototyping thing very soon, but it's good to do make a step back and define things in a higher level so we don't lose the focus, right? It's very common when you start prototyping and designing um, the designing the screens to get lost in the details. So the scenario section, in this case, these diagrams will keep you or will have the information, so you are always well, that you have a reference to make sure that you're covering all the cases that you want to cover, right? So for instance, let's say that one of the requirements is okay, is this one here, right? and it talks about some kind of flow or anything. So let's pretend that the process that we're going to model here first is the sign in process. Okay. Okay. So this works as this section of the product works like any other diagramming tool. So you can start. It's like, okay, so the sign in process will start with home screen. From there, we're going to go to the sign in screen, and from there we can go to the sign up or valid user. We're going to check if the user is a valid user or not, and if so, I'm going to go to my account, and we can just start modeling things. Right, from home you can go to sign in, or from sign in you can go to sign up. From sign in, we're going to check if it's a valid user or not. If it's not, then we go back to the sign in screen. If yes, we can go back here. And the sign up, we can actually just model kind of a process here. And say launch sign process, blah. Okay, so you have all the freedom to design things like diagrams in any way you want, right? So we're talking about traceability. So one thing that we could do at this time is to say, okay, this diagram actually visualizes this requirement that we have here. Okay, so the only thing that we need to do to link the two together is just to drag the requirement into here. And now we have established that traceability, meaning that the requirements, they are starting to have a visual representation to clarify what is explained in that requirement, right? So we have this process, and we could even go and share these processes or these diagrams with stakeholders and start validating at that level, right? Or we can just go and turn that into an actual prototype. Okay, so let's say, okay, I want to create a real page in my prototype. Now we have just jumped to the user interface section, which is the section that you can actually start building things, right? So, and in here, you can, I don't know if you kind of have realized this, but it kind of looks like a PowerPoint thing. So this section is like having PowerPoint with asteroids and just for software design. And you basically can use any of the different widgets that comes with the application, and you can create your own components or the basic components, right? So we could say, okay, our application, we have a main menu that's going to be the home screen, and okay, it's going to have a panel, and in this panel, we're going to have some text, and from here, we have a button, right? That says sign in. Okay, and now an interesting thing, when we go back to the scenario, what we see is that instead of that icon, now we have a thumbnail. So these scenarios are constantly checking if they are becoming real or not in the prototyping section. Right? They're being synchronized with the other thing. And they're also giving us some information to keep us on track and saying, okay, you have created this screen and you said that from here you can go to the sign-in screen, but that is actually not happening. That might be okay, but maybe you want that to happen. Well, let's go to the user interface section. Let's create another screen called sign in. And we're going to have the same kind of menu here. And we're going to just drag one sign-in form. And now we can actually define that navigation saying, okay, when the user clicks on this button, we are going to show the sign-in screen, right? So now going back to the scenario, we see that the scenario is actually starting to become a real thing, right? So it's helping us to make sure that we're covering the different things. Not only that, because we have actually defined some interactions, now we have an interactive prototype, meaning that I can simulate this thing that I have just created, right? So we have the interaction that when I click here, we go to this section, and then so on and so forth. We have the different interactions here that we could define manually, or we can just use the ones that comes with this application. As you can see, this kind of visual representation is very easy to understand for an end user, or even for a developer, or anyone involved in a project, and it's easier to understand than an actual requirement. But you can also link requirements to the specific visuals in case you want to give additional information about that. And the same way we can trace requirements to the scenarios. We can also link the requirements to specific visuals in our designs, right? In our screens. So we can say, okay, for instance, the login. Let me open this a little bit. Login page, right? So we could say, okay, this requirement here, or this user story, actually is linked to this button here. It traces to that button, right? So we go to the requirements. Now we have that this requirement here traces back to the scenario, and this one traces back to the login page. And all that information is also in the simulation. So you have the interactions, you have an interactive thing, but you also have all the different requirements that you have created. So you can provide an additional level of description with this section, right? So you have this visual, you see that there are some requirements linked to this visual. This requirement is actually linked to that button over there, and is also coming from Jira. So you can or Jira, the same would apply to TFS or doors. And if you want to check some additional information about that requirement, you can just click here, and you will get into that same ticket, but in Jira, right? Okay, so of course, there are many options here to prototype. So you could say things like, okay, when you click here, when you click on the button, we're going to change the style of this field here. We're going to add a red border, but just when this thing is just empty, right? Well, okay, so the thing here is to try to recreate, or at least to have the option to recreate any kind of functional requirement, you would say any kind of requirement in the prototype in a visual way. So you you don't have to tell the users to use their imagination. You're just showing them. The same applies for developers. They don't have to use their imagination on how that software is going to behave uh, from the description that you said in the requirements. They can also actually see exactly what we actually wanted. Okay, so we have something here that might be worth to share and get some feedback. That's the whole point of design thinking, right? Collaboration, communication, share this thing that we have just created with stakeholders, business users, so on and so forth. So how can I do that? How Just in Mind in this case supports that process? Well, there are many ways. Of course, you could just simulate this thing with your own laptop and just have a meeting in a room and just get the feedback somehow. Or you can, if the people in the stakeholders of that project, you're very lucky if you have all the stakeholders of your project in your same building, even, right? And that they all have a very open schedule so they can meet with you and they can meet with others and you can organize meetings at any point just to get feedback and so on and so forth. But that normally is not the case. You may be working, or there might be some stakeholders that are in different locations, different time zones, different continents, hopefully not different planets. But basically, it's really hard to have them all in a meeting in real time. So what you can do is to use the sharing options here. That these sharing options will basically create a copy of this simulation, and it will upload that copy of that simulation with all the information that we have put there into well, an account that is your own space that you can use to organize your projects and your simulations there. And once you have it here, you have it in a format that can be easily shared. So once you have it here, it's, in this case, it's using the cloud service, but it's in a format that you can actually go and interact with the prototype. You have all the different information, the scenarios that you have defined are there, so on and so forth. But most importantly, what you have is you and your reviewers will have is the option to add comments to anything that they want to give feedback on. So if a user says or has something to say about, I don't know, this text, for instance, you can just activate this comments mode and click on that specific component and say, okay. The good thing about this is that we don't only keep trace of the requirements, we actually keep trace of all the feedback. So we are tracking who said what and when, and about what, right? What can be important in later stages of the project. I mean, you will have some kind of weapon if you want to use it when those typical conversations happen of, no, I didn't say that. No, yeah, that's not what I meant. Well, you have all that actually documented. So depending on who that person is, you might say, yeah, you said it. Maybe if it's like the CEO, it's like, yeah, whatever you say, boss. But at least you have that there. Also, we were talking about collaboration, right? And I mean, collaborating with oneself is pretty lame. So what you can do is to use all the collaboration features here. So once you have one of these simulations, you can actually start inviting some of your contacts to this prototype. to this simulation. So all these people will get an email notification, and just using their own browsers without having to install anything, no matter where they are in the planet, they will be able to access to this simulation, check all the information, add their own comments, reply to comments from other people that you have invited to this same simulation, and start having conversations on this whole thing, right? The good thing is that you and even your coworkers can be working in the prototype, and that will not affect the copy that you have online. Right? So you have all the freedom of just keep iterating on your design and your specifications and so on without affecting that copy that you have online until you say so. So at some point, you may actually want to get all that feedback here. So in this case, we just need to refresh the comments, and that will just grab all the conversations from that simulation back into our prototype. So there is a section that is just about that, about the conversations, right? And we can say, okay, what are these guys talking about? Oh, they're talking about this. They're talking about this text. Okay, they're saying something, right? Maybe in that process, in that process of the conversations, we have actually managed to discover a new requirement, right? I mean, in this case, this doesn't make sense, but that could be a new requirement that we hadn't took into account. So in this design thinking process of testing and so on, we can do that can happen. Well, if that's the case, we can just create a requirement from that comment name and just close the entire cycle. So the same way we have grabbed things from our requirements management tool into here, we can actually push those requirements, the new requirements into our requirements management tool. So that's the thing, to be iterative, right? You start with text, you visualize that, you share that, get some feedback, and in the process, you either iterate on that or you even discover new requirements that you can actually put into your requirements management tool again. Another good thing is that we are not only bringing those texts into our requirements management tool, we are also bringing the traceability, right? So let's go to this ticket in Jira, right? In this case, what we have here is a link to the visual representation of that requirement. So even developers or someone that is just reading the things in your requirements management tool, they can still go and check the visual representation that clarifies that requirement, a visual representation that has been validated by the different stakeholders. Okay, so that's how design thinking and just in mind works in a nutshell. And in the 10 minutes that last, let me guys ask some of the questions that you have put in the GoToWebinar thing. And remember, if you have any questions now, it's a good time to just write them there. Okay, there is a question that says, I do not see requirements on our desktop version. Yeah, well, there are two editions of Just in Mind. One is called Professional and one is called Enterprise. Enterprise is meant to be used by larger teams in more structured kind of projects, and in that version is where you have the requirements, the integrations, and anything of that sense. So if you want more information about that, we're more than happy to schedule a one-to-one meeting with you and explain you more about this the benefits of the enterprise version. Really good question. How you transition one prototype from desktop to mobile, right? So you started with desktop, and now we want to build the mobile version, but we want kind of to reuse some of the things that we have done in this version, right? Well, there is an option that is when you create a new prototype, you can say, okay, now I'm going to design the version for iPhone, for instance. And then instead of starting from an empty prototype, you can actually start from another prototype. In this case, you can start from the desktop version of the prototype. Can visuals be accessed from a Jira ticket? Yeah, we have just shown that at the very end of the presentation. But yeah, basically, you actually bring those visuals, and because those visuals can be interactive, we are not just bringing static mockups or images here. So instead of just having some screenshots, static screenshots here, we can actually link to the specific section in the prototype, like in this case, right? So in this case, this thing is being visualized here, but we're not talking about just a visual representation. We're talking about a process, an interactive thing. So the developer can actually interact and see how the process goes, how the experience of this user story actually is, right? So that's the way we bring those visuals to the requirements tool, by adding those links to the sections, to the elements that trace back to that requirement. And all these collaboration features, by default, they use the server that we have in the cloud, but you can have all these collaboration features installed behind your own firewall. So no issues about security there. Oh, yeah, this session will be recorded. It's being recorded. So we will share the recording afterwards. We integrate right now with Doors Next Generation only. But let us know if if you need any other kind of integration. You can try the product, the whole enterprise version, full featured, for 30 days for free. You just have to go to the website and sign up there. The accounts are multi-user accounts, so you can just create an account, invite some coworkers, and start sharing things and so on. Yep, so that's there. Okay. Do you support responsive design? Oh yeah, definitely. Let me show you guys an example real quick. So one thing that you guys can do is to go to a website, and in the website we have a bunch of examples. And for instance, one of the examples is precisely a prototype that prototypes responsive design, right? So liquid layouts, breakpoints, like for instance, it goes to a point where uh, it's in tablet or mobile, and then the whole thing can change, and so on and so forth. And one question says, since the visuals are linked, how can someone download it as a document? Well, any prototype, you have both things, right? You have the simulation, so you don't actually need to download anything at all to see the simulation and to see all the information in a prototype, because it will be like hosted in the server. But if you want the actual prototype to make some changes, for instance, um, all the prototypes are stored in files, in a VP file. So you can either send that file over to that person or share this file with through the server and invite that person so he can start working on that same file with you with a check-in check-out process, or just go to the account and there is an option to just download the VP file. Okay, how to work with screenshots? Yeah, that's a very common situation. In many cases, you're not designing a whole software from scratch, but just designing some kind of change in already existing software. Well, it just basically use a screenshot. So let's say we go to Google, right? Well, we can just grab a screenshot from here. So bring that into Just in Mind. And just use things like the hotspot option to define sections of the screen to be interactive, or even just put, input fields without the border here, just to make it look even more real, right? So that's one thing. If you already have those kind of mockups in different formats, you can create a screen straight from one of the images that you may have in your file system. Or if you're using Sketch, you can actually just, we have a plugin for Sketch, and you can just export and turn your Sketch file into a just-in-mind file. We'll just try to answer the most simple questions. There are a bunch that are like very, very complex. So some of you guys are actually already using the platform. Uh, we will address those after the presentation. Yeah, we have you have versioning. You just need to use the share prototype option, and the share prototype option will keep track of the different versions. So you can have like you can be invited to a prototype from another user, and you will see the different versions of that prototype. You can always see the different the things that have been modified for each version. You can always go back to one of those versions for sure. You can also generate a specifications file. So you can just go to export to document. I will generate a Microsoft Word document that you can later on save as a PDF, for instance. And all that document can be completely customized. And just as an example, let me show you guys how much information you can have in those documents real quick. But it's basically all the information from the UI, the interactions, all the information about the requirements that you define there, even the comments, you name it. You can have all in a document or in different documents as well, right? So you can have for each of the screens a description of the interactions. You can have also like the scenarios that you have created, the description of the requirements, and so on and so forth. Yeah, you can always export the requirements either to your requirements management tool or to an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, you can even you can create your own widget libraries. So if you have a bunch of already existing assets, just go ahead, you create your widget library and you import all the assets there, and then you can use them in your prototype. Well, there are a ton of questions. We will make sure to answer them via email. I want to thank you all for assisting to this webinar. Please stay tuned. We're going to do more webinars in the near future. Just for as an example, in next week we're going to do a webinar explaining what's new in the latest version of Just in Mind and how to use Just in Mind with Sketch. Or if at any point you guys want more information about either Just in Mind or the IIBA, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email or to contact us. We're more than pleased to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you very much. We'll make sure to send you guys the recording of this session, and we will appreciate any kind of feedback that you guys could give us related to this webinar, if you like it or not, if you just hate my voice and my accent, which would be understandable, or not, or maybe you love it. So any kind of feedback that you may have, just let us know, please. Thank you very much. And if you just want to, again, if you want to stay tuned, just make sure to go to our website, and you can be added to our Facebook page, or just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, the LinkedIn group, or just the blog itself. We also have a newsletter that you can join to get the latest news about us. Yep. So thank you very much and have a really good day all. Bye bye.